dry and I can post it up later. But
Okay.
there we go. No,
The stream is live.
The stream is live, finally. Welcome to the Au. I'm your host, Beef Loaf. This show is being sponsored by our friends, Punky's Pizza and Pasta, located at 2600 South Wallace, my personal favorite eatery in the neighborhood. They have the best selection of pizzas and pastas, as well as sandwiches and salads of any spot in Bridgeport. Currently, they have a terrific Monday nights only special. One medium cheese pizza for $12.99. No promo codes, no minimums. Just place the order after 3 p.m. and you get one medium cheese pizza for $12.99. Toppings can be added, but at their normal prices. Hit the website, punkyspizza.com, for all of your carry-out or delivery needs or to cater your next party. You can also call 312-842-2100. The Scarlotta family will take care of you. Punky's Pizza and Pasta. This show is also powered by you, the Loyal 108 supporter. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to tickle the undercarriage in the process. Like, comment, turn on notifications, and most definitely super chat, because that's how we get paid. It's how we continue to make the content you know and love. Tonight's guest... He's the head of content at CHGO Sports, which is part of the All City Network. He's an avid runner and has spent portions of his career working with Jeff Passan. Poor guy. Kevin Kaduk, welcome to the Au.
What's going on? Who's the poor guy, me or Jeff? I don't know.
I assume Jeff. Or I don't know. I assume you for working with Jeff. Just seeing the way he acts out there on the internets.
Right. No, we always have a good time. I know you guys have a good relationship, which is what made me want to come on this show. And Jeff is awesome. I mean, he's been a long-time friend for a long time. And what you see is what you get with him.
I was going to say, we had the initial back and forth a little bit on Twitter. We invited him to be on the podcast. We thought, he said he would come on. We thought, no way this guy's showing up. He shows up. We're like shocked. You know, we asked for 15, 20 minutes. The first time he comes on, he does like a half hour. And we're like, oh my God, that went so well. So then we had asked him next year, you want to come on again, Jeff? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll come on with you guys or whatever. And again, 15, 20 minutes. He stayed for an hour. So it's just like, if he's having fun cutting it up, he just was willing to stay. And so I always thought that was really cool. What a sport of him. He's on ESPN. He's one of the most famous guys doing that. And he talks to three dickheads like me, Terezi, and my sex summer.
Well, I think that's like what makes him like so popular and why people like him is that he can go so serious and like write a book like The Arm, which is, gets into all the Tommy John surgery and all the stuff like that. And obviously, he's going to be in the Hall of Fame one day for being a baseball writer, right?
Right. Yeah.
At the same time, he can just like turn on a dime and go on someone's podcast or do his Elmo impression or, whatever. Like, I mean, one of my like favorite career memories is in 2016 during the World Series, we're in the auxiliary box and I had my laptop and I had like these USB like Nintendo controllers and we're just up there playing like RBI baseball. Like, we're talking about like at that point, I think he was still at Yahoo. I can't remember. But like, like this is a guy who like after the game was going to be writing the story that like everyone needed to read.
Right.
And here he is, 3 hours before the game, just like hitting me on RBI baseball.
Yeah, he's what in gambling parlance what we'd call a sport. Someone who's always willing to mix it up with you, at any cost. So that's I absolutely I just love the guy as well. Baloney in the comments says I like when Passan makes fun of Beef's ass. Yeah, there was a picture of me. I have sort of a flat posterior, Kevin. I mean, we don't know each other that well, but I figured I'd let you know. And there was a picture of me like laying on the ground, and he said a nice moose knuckle or whatever. I don't know. He murdered me on the internet.
He does have an ass fixation. I will tell you that. So it doesn't surprise me.
That's good to know for the next time we may interact. So I've been wanting to have you on for a while, and I really wanted to discuss. You have an interesting career path, and particularly you have one of the hot new brands in Chicago. So I figured we'd get down James Brown on some of this. So it starts way back. You graduate from UW-Madison. You and I are similar ages. I think I'm a little bit older than you. Maybe I graduated in 2000 from college, so we're around the same age. Okay. And you head off to the Kansas City Star. Were you always thinking I'm going to work for a newspaper, or how did that come about?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. I showed up at UW. Like I always wanted to do like either like TV or radio. Like I looked at all the Big Ten schools. I actually grew up, I'm ashamed to say, like a huge Notre Dame fan. I don't know if I'm ashamed to say it. Like a good Catholic kid from Chicago. My grandmother would say the rosary during games, right? So I like growing up, I wanted to go to Notre Dame, right? And then like I look at the school, I'm like, wow, this costs a lot more money than my parents have, and they don't really have a good student newspaper or really any journalism program to speak of. So I went to Wisconsin, at which point they actually didn't have an over-the-air radio station, and I was kind of at the forefront of streaming because they had an internet radio station. Like if you can imagine in 1997. And they made
like
a big
who's
deal of
listening
it.
to the internet radio station in that era? Because it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember when I was started listening to stuff through the
Right.
computer, through the phone, or whatever. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably through like Winamp or I don't know like what program it was. But you know, like I got into that, and then I showed up. I wanted to write, and I went to the Badger Herald and kind of got bitten by the writing bug. And I always liked laying out newspapers, and I like planning sections and things like that. And I was there like during an amazing time because it was 2 Rose Bowl years. Ron Dane wins a Heisman. Badgers go to a Final Four. Danny Heatley's there for hockey. Like it was awesome. So I really kind of got the journalism, sports media thing there. And I graduated and I thought, man, I just want to do the newspaper career path. I want to cover high school sports. I want to cover college team. I want to cover pro team. And then, you know, sooner or later, maybe I'll be a columnist at the Tribune or the Sun Times. Right. And
yeah,
within like 10 years, that was like not a viable career path.
I was going to say, I go back to a time when the newspaper was the thing. You know, you couldn't wait till it showed up because you could read about what Michael Jordan did, or even
Right.
more so, pictures, like images of the players was like a huge deal. Like I was just going through some stuff in my basement, and my parents did all these cutouts because I am old enough to remember the '85 Bears, and like cutouts of like newspaper from that era. Like that was kind of how we got the images. It's a different world now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I remember. In Madison, you could actually get the Chicago Tribune delivered to your dorm.
Okay.
Because one of the printing houses was up there, and so they would actually like you could get a student rate for like $2 for the month or whatever. And I remember I would put together the Badger Herald. I would get done, and then I would walk home, and like the Tribune would already be waiting for me. And at that point, I mean, the Tribune was at the height of its powers. I mean, they had more money than they knew what to do with. They were sending people all over the place. I mean, they had like 3 or 4 college writers, a national college writer, and that's just kind of like what I wanted to do. And I don't know if you remember like the old chicagosports.com. Like that was like the first like website. They would at 2 a.m. they would put every article in that day's paper up on chicagosports.com. They would just they were giving away their content for free at that point because how are you ever going to make money off of the internet, right? And
right.
So at one point I was like, well, I don't need this newspaper anymore. I'm just going to log into chicagosports.com when I get done with my college newspaper shift and, you know, read like Andy Bagnato and Teddy Greenstein and Paul Sullivan. And so I thought that was going to be a great career, but, you know, I think it became pretty evident pretty early on that the internet was going to be a major player. And I got pretty into blogs like really, really quickly. And I mean, to the point where when I was at the Kansas City Star, I was like, let's start a blog. And they're like, why would we ever do that? And kind of like the beginning of my end at the Kansas City Star.
Working there. So yeah. I mean, so you mentioned a bunch of great writers from the Tribune. Who were writing influences? If you wanted to do this, I assume you're reading other people's work and thinking, I could do that, or I could have a spin on that. Like, who were your influences when you were going down this path, Kevin?
I mean, I'm like any other like newspaper idiot, of course, like Mike Royko. I mean, the greatest, the GOAT. I mean, no one will ever top what he was able to do in this city. It's just amazing writer. But, you know, I loved Bernie Lincecum. I thought the way that he played with words, put words together, just looked at a game that I had watched as a, 13 or 14-year-old and just saw it a completely different way than maybe I saw it on television. I love that. You know, Paul Sullivan's a legend. He was actually Mike Royko's one of his legmen early on.
Really?
I've always loved talking with Sully about that. Teddy was always great too, and Fred Mitchell was really early on. Like used to answer my, I don't know what they were called on. When you would direct message someone on AOL? What was that called?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it was we were like AIM or whatever. Yeah, that's
He had his
little
screen name at the bottom of his column. It was like Kick 3485 or something. And I was just like, hey man, I'm trying to get into this.
I love it that he responded. I love that he's like, oh, okay, I'll answer the question. Why not do this?
He just tweeted today. Today's the 50th anniversary of him starting at the Tribune, which is amazing.
Oh wow. No, that's absolutely incredible. So you're at Kansas City Star. Is this where you first meet Jeff Passan, and what was he like when he was, a little, a green?
Yeah, so
wet behind the ears, if you will.
Honestly, so I was there maybe a year and a half before, and I started out in the bureau as covering like high school sports, and they would give me like, I'd be able to write features. So a lot of times, like the Yankees would come in, they'd be like, go write a feature about Roger Clemens, or Cardinals were in town, like, hey, there's this guy named Albert Pujols, go write about him. Yeah. So that was like really cool, right? And I really wanted to kind of move up the ladder and become either a beat writer or one of the national reporters. And the national baseball job opened because Dick Cagle retired, and our sports editor just like kind of like loved hiring like the next hot thing. And they're like, we're hiring this guy, Jeff Passan from Fresno. And quite honestly, like I was pissed off that I did not get the job. Yes! To the point where I was like, fuck this guy, like whatever. Like, and I think we went out like the first night. I think he was actually scared to talk to me because he had heard that I was mad that he got the job or whatever. And like 3 beers in, like we were, the best of friends. So
I was gonna say, did he like do something specially, buy tequila shots or something? I figured like getting you a little liquored up is probably a good idea, but you never know. Some people get aggressive when they get liquored up.
We were at the Quaff, which is a great bar in Kansas City. Next time you're there, for like a Sox series, but I think Wright Thompson was there, and it was just like kind of one of these nights. I mean, we were like such young idiots. Like we were all probably in between, 23 and 25 or 26. And again, that was like the peak of the stars powers. That was Joe Posnanski and Jason Whitlock before he went crazy, and Sam Mellinger and Jason King. And there's so many huge talents that were there. And we had so much money that was like, hey, I want to go back home to Chicago and write about Kirk Heinrich because he just got drafted by the Bulls and he's from KU. Yeah, sure, go, whatever. Just turn in the receipts, right? Like, that just like blows my mind now that was ever a thing. But every newspaper, it was just a monopoly. Like,
right.
That's how it worked.
Yeah, that's where the information flow was coming from. And I remember back in that era too, sports talk was dominated by, what did this columnist say? Let's break down the what was in the paper the day before. There was a lot of that in the early days of sports talk. They were almost ate off of that, kind of like maybe they didn't have the resources to have their own beat, and they're just like, well, whatever the columnist said, we're gonna.
Well, then they just started hiring the columnists. Like I remember, like Jay Mariotti had a show here. Like I don't really remember it because I didn't really listen to it, but in Kansas City, like Whitlock and Paz had shows. It was definitely a thing. Like, and then like. Pardon the Interruption came along, and then I was like, all right, let's put all the writers on TV. I don't know if that was a good or bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, this is post sports writers on TV, which was like a very early primitive version of the stuff. I remember that. It was like, it would be on like Sports Channel or whatever, on like 4:30 on a Saturday. It's like, here's 4 guys smoking cigarettes, just talking.
It was the absolute best. It was like, I was sitting there like I'm 11. And I would feel it right at home in this table with these like, it's like 4 guys who are like older than Moses and Rick Tellender. Yeah, he's the only one with dark hair the entire thing. Right. Yeah, Treasy brings up a point. Is the Quaff the joint that has the coldest beer ever? Because we did. Yes. I think we went to this place last time we were in KC in 2018. Yeah. I loved it. It was like an old school bar, but they're like, we have the coldest beer ever, and they popped the cap on one of my buddy's beers and just like ice poured up. He goes, all right, I'm a little less cold. How about that? Like it's like right by all the hotels. Like it's been there forever. So
I love it. So you and Jeff end up hitting it off. Mm-hmm. And then at some point, you move on before Jeff, is what it seems like from what I can tell.
Yeah. So I kind of just got a little homesick down there, honestly. And I was like looking for any ways to kind of get back. And I thought at that point, book publishing was also a thing. They would give money to fucking any idiot who asked. And I was like, all right, well, so I mean, we'll probably get into like my weird baseball allegiances, but I'm like, I'll just write a book about the Cubs. And so I like pitch this thing, like I'm just going to go and live in Wrigleyville and kind of like go around and just write about figures in the neighborhood, from the Ball Hawks to Ronnie Woo Woo, like whatever. Yeah. And I put it together, and like Penguin gave me money, like, and they had no idea that Gene Wojciechowski was also writing the same book, but about the 2004 season. Okay. So that kind of came out a year before mine. And then I wrote about the 2005 season, which, had I the thing I always kind of wonder, like, had I written about the White Sox, like, what would, like, the sales probably still would have been lower than a book about the Cubs, but it was just like a very weird thing. So I actually came back.
What
it was
timing,
awesome.
huh?
Yeah, because I went to like 65 Cubs games that year and probably 30 White Sox games. Like, it was awesome. I was 25. I had like a book advance. You know, I had an apartment in Wrigleyville. It cost me like $500 a month. Like,
nice. You're living the life.
It was really cool. Yeah. So, and I just wrote. I mean, they should have given a 25-year-old a book contract, but they did. And you know, especially like, so I'm like a weird person. Like, I just love baseball. Like, I grew like, if the Sox and Cubs played together in the World Series, I would 100% be rooting for the White Sox, right?
Okay.
But I always like growing up, like you would watch the White Sox at night, and it's like you get home from school and the Cubs are on. It's like, well, I freaking love baseball, so I've never really bought into like the rivalry. You know, for you, it's growing up, they never played each other either. So
right, yeah. Well, they'd have the one game, and it'll be the fake game. It'll be an exhibition game, and then some random minor leaguers. Occasionally, Michael Jordan would play in the game, and then it'll be like, oh, okay, oh, holy shit, this is a real game. But yeah, you're right. It was a long time where they never really played each other. And you're right, that dynamic is people our age where you got home from school or during the summer. During the summer, they had the 120 game going, you know, during the day, and then the Sox would be, you know, at night. And if they're on the West Coast, like, you know, it might be 9 o'clock before you're getting the White Sox. So you're always watching a day game.
You would go like on school field trips to the Cubs games. Like, I'm not going to show, you know, I'm not going to show up here and act like an asshole. So like, it's never, you know, and I know it's different for like you guys like you who like grew up in Bridgeport or maybe someone who grew up in Rogers Park. You know what I mean? Like for the Cubs, like I know that's completely different. So it's always, it just puts me in a weird position sometimes, I feel like.
So you write the book. Yeah. And then let's fast forward a couple years later. You end up at Yahoo. This is around 2008, and you're an MLB blog editor. What's it like overseeing a blog at Yahoo in 2008? I have to think like Yahoo's really zooming. I mean, this is where everyone is playing fantasy sports basically at that time. There weren't a lot of outlets to play fantasy sports at that time. They kind of were one of the leaders back then. What was this like?
It was super fun. Although I will say, like, when I got hired there, my dad's like, you're not going to last more than 2 years because Yahoo is on its way down because they had all these CEO troubles. And I was there for 13 years and CEO troubles like never stopped. And I mean, it's still kicking. I still have a lot of friends there, but it was awesome. I mean, they wrote a blank check. They had all the money in the world. Another theme, right? CHGO did not have all the money in the world. It ended at CHGO.
We'll get to how wealthy CHGO is later on in the show, but you know, I'm sure you don't have any money. That's
yeah. So, what was I going to say? Yeah. So they basically like gave Dave Morgan, who was the editor of the LA Times, like, let's just build this stuff, build a blog network, build all this like kind of stuff that's on the up and up. They hired Jamie Mottram, who had put together AOL Fan House, which is a real big thing about now almost 20 years. And I had been writing all different kinds of blogs, personal blogs. I worked for the Northwest Herald up in McHenry County, did a blog for them that was semi-popular. And so I knew like at that point, I was like, all right, I'm all in on the internet thing. Like, I'm never going back to a newspaper. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of freedom. You know, like, you could really go anywhere, like write anything you wanted, write in any style you wanted. I mean, I really wish that I would have had like the creating tools that people have now, you know, whether it's video, podcasts. If I had that in 2008, I feel like, you know, myself and Dave Brown and a couple of others, like we could have been like the first John Boy, right? Because like that's the style we were creating, but it was all text. So
right. Yeah, you don't have all the mediums, so it's hard to capture. Well, I wanted to ask you that question, Kevin, because there is the term blog and there is the term like column, right? I would consider like, well, how do you differentiate between the two? Because you said blog, we can write in any style. We can do, explain to me what is the difference to you, at least.
I don't think there's a lot. I mean, I think now it's like newsletter, right? Like you could newsletter, blog, and column, I think are almost all interchangeable. I think it's just like a personal form of publishing. Mm-hmm. And you're not really bound by a lot of rules. So like I ran the Big League Stew blog, that was called. So like we were really irreverent. Like we would do anything from like, we would like go, like, it was probably like an asshole thing, like looking back at it, but we would do like Name That Belly or something, and like we would like literally go on Getty Images and like look at like a picture like Charlie Manuel, and like then just like crop off, you know. It's like, okay, here's like a fat guy in a Phillies uniform. Like, guess who this is? It's like Charlie Manuel. Like, no, it's Joe Blanton. Like, people loved it. Like, everyone except for Charlie Manuel and Joe Blanton.
I'm sure. Yeah. Subject's probably not too into it, but yeah, absolutely, yeah, right. To me, that's like the differentiator, because I consider like a column is more like professional writing. A blogging is more here. Let's just put some stuff together that ideas or whatever, and it doesn't have to look like it could belong in a book. This is
if you
just
remember, it was different. Like it's like, okay, I'm going to post 6 things a day. I was like kind of off that old Deadspin model, right? And okay, one thing is just going to be a funny picture we found on the wire services. One thing is going to be a look at someone who's on a 12-game hitting streak. And another thing is going to be like a look at that night's games, you know, with a funny take on it. Right. That was really fun. Like, I really liked that model, and I think a lot of it was blown up by Twitter, which is one of the many reasons I love and hate Twitter, I guess.
Yep.
But
you got to put that pellet out there, Kevin. You put the pellet out there a lot of times, and you get people coming to the website a lot of times. Right?
Well, you would just write for people who are like in cubicles, right? Like that's what you would do. And like now we make podcasts for people who like can't necessarily. I don't know. Maybe people listen to podcasts where everyone's working at home. Like, I don't know how it works anymore.
It's different environment. So back then, you're editor. I assume that you're at least partially in charge of acquiring the talent, getting people in the door for a blogger. What are you looking for bloggers? Not only when you were doing the MLB blog, but then when later on you were doing kind of broader sports. What were you looking for at that time?
Someone who was creative, someone who was clean writing, someone who was self-driven, who like didn't need somebody like on their back, kind of, you know, driving the whip on them or whatever. Just like funny people who could connect well, people who could network well, people who could build community. I mean, it's not too much different from like what you're still looking for 10 or 15 years later, I don't think.
Well, now, were people coming to you with resumes at that time? Or was this just like, I saw a goofy guy, right? He has a tiny blog, and I'm like, that person's great. I'm pulling them in here. Like, or was it like professional? I just graduated college. My desire is to work for Yahoo. That sort of.
Do you remember Google Reader? It was like a thing you could put like blog feeds in. I felt like I've met a lot of people that way, and you just kind of have favorites. And Ian Castleberry, who covered the Tigers for a blog called Bless You Boys. I don't know if it still exists. It was an SB Nation blog. Like, I just really liked the way he wrote, and he was like clean, but he was funny. Drew Fairservice he still writes for I think The Athletic. He covered the Blue Jays in Canada. There was all different sorts of people, and people sent you resumes, but it was also just kind of like just being aware of who was out there. I wasn't the top editor. I was like the top editor of baseball for the first 5 or 6 years. Okay. And then I became more of like I think I became head blogs editor. I can't remember exactly what my title was. But like my first 6 years was baseball editor. And then the last 7 was like basically just being a jack of all trades, which I thought would like be great, but it ultimately doomed me in the end. But
well, let's get there. You end up leaving Yahoo or not being with Yahoo anymore. How did it doom you, Kevin?
Yeah, so that was like right at the beginning of it was like a month before the pandemic, and it was just kind of like, oh, hey, we're gonna maybe sell ourselves. Let's get rid of a lot of as much salaries as we can. And someone like just drew a line through my name, and I got just like anyone else getting laid off, the kind of typical story. And then like a month later, the pandemic, or I don't know, 3 months later, I think I got laid off in December 2019 in the pandemic. But then like once the pandemic started, they're like, we're doing a hiring freeze. It's not right to lay anybody off. I was like, man.
Honestly, a couple more runway.
Honestly, I'd probably still be working there had that happen. And which, I was actually ready to move on because I had been there for 13 years, and it was such it was hard getting some things through. Like, I mean, for example, like my friend Jay Busby and I started a podcast in 2011 called Why Is This News? Because anytime you would write a blog, the first comment would be from someone saying, why is this news? And our first guest was actually Hank Aaron, which was amazing.
Wow.
And our second guest was Donald Trump, who was pushing a golf show.
Oh my goodness.
And so like we get him on, and we're like, hey Donald. And he's like, man, I love your show. I listen to it all the time. And we're like, great. Like, we actually haven't premiered the show. We're taping this, so it went. Yeah.
Sounds perfect.
He was trying to buy the Mets at the time, or maybe the Bills. I can't remember what it was like. But so like we started this podcast, and it was like no one knew like how to sell it. No one really wanted to kind of get out of bed for like the small amount of money they might make for selling it.
Right.
And it was like let's just do this and continue to grow it. I tried starting a newsletter in like 2015, same thing. And then finally in 2019 or 2018, they came back and they're like, all right, let's start a podcast network. Be in charge of that. And I was like, well, I tried to do it 7 years ago, and everyone else is like, everyone is already lapping the field, but let's try. So it was like that sort of thing. Like,
yeah, just you have the idea, you can't get it through because it's too big of an organization at the time, and then now try to catch up. Now, good luck with the idea you had now, but you got to catch up with everyone else out there. Now, at any point too, Kevin, did it start to get like stale to you? Because there is in these jobs there's a creative element to it, and you want to stay fresh a little bit. Or were you still very energized by that part of it?
I always loved it. I mean, I loved our staff there. Like, I mean, some of them are still my best friends in the world. And people have gone different ways. Some people are still there, but being able to work with the people that I worked with there, I absolutely missed that. The thing that I did get tired of is like working at a place like Yahoo. It's so much more about the national story. Okay. There's only so much you can really be interested in Tom Brady or the Dallas Cowboys or, LeBron, right. Like that part like didn't really interest me. So like at some point I started to think like, all right, how am I going to kind of like get back to Chicago, do that thing, write about the things that I'm passionate about. And so like I had the newsletter idea, and then once I got laid off, I was like, all right, let's just roll with this. And it was perfect time to start it during the pandemic.
Yeah. So that was your pandemic baby, the Midway Minute. And when you start doing this, was it a lot creative juices? Like, hey, I haven't been able to exercise this in a while. I haven't been able to really write about real local stuff. Like, I was just sifting through some stuff. I caught a blog that you wrote in there about Dan McNeil when he got in trouble, and just I thought you did a great job analyzing like his career. Like, he was probably the best showrunner there was for the time period he was in there. But then you also knew that this is how this would end. Like that, just like that's who the man is. It was very interesting. So was it just like, man, I want to stretch those. I want to work those muscles.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a pretty good freelance paying job from USA Today through like a contact. So I would basically do that during the day and then just stay up all night, to write Midway Minute. And I wasn't really going anywhere, so it was like that was fine. It was fine. Like it was great. So I love like just finding something new to write about every day. I mean, it was really exhausting if I'm being frank about it. But I also
was curious what it's like to the everyday about it. I guess like you have to probably have to work on idea generation. You do anything special to like, okay, here's the way I'm going to make sure that I can always generate stuff so that I have access, because it's got to be a lot of pressure to write something every single day.
Well, newsletters and Substack were so new at that point, and the tools were still pretty primitive, and there was so much about audience building that wasn't there, and there wasn't a lot of like easy way to get audience. So it was like really, really kind of hard to do that. That was the most exhausting part of it. And there's a lot of things like now I would do differently, knowing what I know now. Like I tried to like, all right, hey, everyone pay me $50 a year. And like, I don't know. I don't think that was like the greatest idea, but it was just like tried a lot of different things. So, but it was fun because like nobody could tell me to do things differently or that I was doing things wrong. It was just kind of flying by the seat of my pants.
Yeah, 100% creative control, which is kind of a nice thing when you're doing your art. Now you're doing this during the pandemic. Did this preclude you from like binge watching a bunch of TV shows? You had to focus on this and stuff.
No, absolutely. Like, yeah. When everyone was like writing all that stuff, it's like I don't know. Like my main like consumption was, I don't know if you remember, like every Tuesday night, Fish would like show a different like old show on YouTube. They called it like Dinner and a Movie.
No, I did not know that.
I would just put the headphones on and just kind of like tune out and just put the newsletter together. That was like my binging thing during the pandemic. But I can't even remember.
No
like,
Tiger King or anything like
yeah,
that?
I had like a
No?
3 and 4-year-old at that time too, so that was a whole bunch. So it was. I haven't watched television since I had children.
It's actually that's kind of basically true. When they get to a certain age, then they want you to watch some of their things too. You know, they want to pull you back in there. All right, so now 2022 comes along, and you are hired to be the head of content at CHGO. What's the initial mandate? What are you guys thinking about building, kind of straight out of the gate?
Yeah. So I think about a year and a half into Midway Minute, I kind of became aware of like what DNVR was and who Brandon Spano was, and you know what the staff was doing. And I looked at that site and I thought, like, man, if when I thought of what Midway Minute could become, I was like, okay, this is like what Midway Minute could become in like 5 years, and I may be broke and divorced and everything else by then. So I just I think I friended, or I don't know what you call it, on LinkedIn. I think I connected with Brandon on LinkedIn, and I don't think I ever talked with him. And then like 3 months later, I got a call from Eric Edholm, worked with me at Yahoo, at Pro Football Weekly. That was a stop we didn't talk about in my career, but that was very brief. And he's like, hey, my neighbor Jake Flanagan subscribes to your newsletter. Like, he thinks you would be a great fit to be head of content. Are you interested? And I was like, holy shit, this is a really great coincidence. And I think in the week I was talking to Jake, and I mean, they were trying to put together things like so quickly and just launch. And they had done proof of concept in PHNX, and we're coming to a larger market. And it was like, can you get this done here? And okay, it's like, what are we launching by bear season? They're like, no, we're going to be launched in 6 weeks in March. And I was like, holy shit. So like, let's just get to work. Wow, and we did it really under the radar. And I don't know. I still have no idea how we didn't have a lease. We didn't have a computer. Like, we didn't
everything you had to get lined up.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we were lucky that we did move so quickly, because we launched, and then like the digital ad market like dried up in like April or May. So like, had we launched, like, waited to launch in that bear season, like, I'm not sure if it would have happened.
Yeah, since you had already put the commitment in there, you're going. But yeah, it's
right.
It's a little sketchy there. Now, what was the thesis, Kevin? Because Chicago's a different market than Denver or Phoenix, right? It's a huge market, bigger obviously. It is sports crazy, but it has two well-known sports radio stations. The television stations, particularly ones in which the teams play, like Marquee or NBC Sports Chicago, they are very focused on their teams and producing a lot of content. Then you have about 1 billion blogs and podcasts and everything else. A few of them are even decent too. Most of us aren't worth the shit, but a few are pretty good. Like, so where were you looking at? You thinking, okay, where are we going to fit in here? How are we doing this?
Yeah, I think like the mandate's always just have been like lead from the crowd and not be like a jerk, and kind of like serve as a hub for all the fans. So like, we've always been, I think, welcoming to like really anybody. We've wanted people to come through our offices, and I know you guys have been on the Sox show, and so many people from the Sox Nation have been on White Sox, and same with Bulls and Bears, whatever. Like, we've kind of just wanted to be that home, and then also just kind of meld that fan access with the reporter access, and then kind of just put like that very light filter professionalism over it, right? And we will not say that we're professional, that we aren't, but I mean, like, we've got a decent setup here, right? Like, we've got money. We were able to hire a lot of talented people in the market, which is amazing, right? Like, our staff is made up from a lot of those outlets that you mentioned, both professional and people just doing it at home.
Amateur. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
so like, and the thing is like, you're totally outright that the markets are different. Like, when we were talking with Denver, I don't think they understood like how hard edged Chicago fans can be. Denver is like, hey man, like let's watch the Nugs, and we'll like smoke a bowl, and then maybe we'll just go skiing or hiking, which is great. Like, that's the market, right?
Yep,
that's not Chicago.
Right? That's absolutely not Chicago.
It's like, we're going to watch the game, and if they lose, like, we are going to threaten to burn somebody.
I was going to say, one of the most popular shows that I could ever remember on any network was Doug and OB doing post games
Right.
on 670 after Bears games because they would scream and yell and they were so mad about the game, especially when they lost. These guys were losing their minds and they're old men and they're just screaming. People loved it. Like that's the involvement of the fan in Chicago.
Right. So like, and I think like one of the challenges has been is like I think that professional media in Chicago has always kind of been like a level up on a stage, and whether intentionally or not, there's that feeling that you're talking down to people, and if you're down there, you feel like you're being talked down to.
Right.
And
correct.
I again, whether it's intentional or not, so I think people are kind of trained to be like, hey, this person who's getting paid to do this is an asshole, right? Whether it's name whoever on either radio station or Jay Mariotti, who is an asshole.
That's proven. So yeah, that's
right. He like sent me a really weird DM. I've never talked to the guy. He sent me like a weird DM like a week into this thing. We were like, you're gonna crash and burn. I was like, thanks.
He's rooting against you 1 week into it. Like, what the heck?
Right. So I think there's been like this part of it where you've kind of almost had to retrain the audience. Like, hey, we are just like you. We're going to be accessible. We're going to talk to you on Twitter. We're going to talk to you in Discord. We're going to talk to you when we see you at an event. We're going to talk to you when we see you at a stadium because you are, like we are you. Like no one, there's not like ego in this building, which is like lets me know that Jake and I did a really good job. Like people talk, connect with whoever it is, whether it's someone like you who don't sell yourself short. Your Section 108 is amazing. What you guys have built is incredible. Or
thank you. Check is in the mail. Don't worry.
or just someone who's maybe just like starting the next 108, right? Or wants to do that. We really try not to draw any lines. And if you are coming and you are leading from the pavement, that's a lot easier to do.
I mean, that's a great ethos, Kevin. I totally agree with that. I mean, it's something we always try to do, even though we're just doing our own side thing here. Now, I want to ask. You gave a little bit there, but explain how you built out each team in the CHGO group, and how does it vary by sports? Like putting the team together.
Yeah, I think it was kind of a process of just kind of putting together an Excel spreadsheet and kind of just putting everyone down and like, hey, who would be interested in doing this? We were also fighting against the perception of the game, which was like that third radio station, which I don't know how long that lasted. And then
Chicago Sports Webio,
which was a literal pyramid scheme.
It was. It was.
So it was tough. I mean, some people took our calls. Some people are like, nope, not doing that. So, which was fine. I mean, I don't know if I had been in a secure job, if I would have been like, yeah, we're just going to get an office space and a couple of MacBooks and some webcams. And there's this guy named Jake and we'll go from there. But I mean, luckily, we got a lot of our top targets, like it was really cool. And I think there was also people that we identified who we knew could be stars, who maybe weren't as well known, whether it's, Sean Anderson or Cody Del Mendo.
I was going to say, I'm glad you brought Sean up because I am a big Sean Anderson fan on doing White Sox. And Greg, I love Greg Braggs too. I don't even follow that. I don't care much about the Cubs, and I do follow his Bears work, but just him in general. I just like all of what he kind of does. And
I feel like he's like the new Mike North, honestly. As long as he doesn't get me in a pyramid scheme, I'll continue to play. But I also like Mike, so.
But you mentioned Sean, and this is what I wanted to kind of get at too. Like, how important was it to you, Kevin? I've known Sean a little bit when he was with 670. He didn't have a giant Twitter following. He wasn't like one of the producers that was talking on air all the time. Mm-hmm. You could tell he's smart, but like, how did you build teams like this? Because you get Herb Lawrence, that's an obvious one, right? Got a big Twitter following, has been well known, all this stuff. You get Vinny Duber, and yes, he was the beat reporter for NBC Sports Chicago. That's an obvious one. Sean, to me, non-obvious one, but a great choice. I'm a big fan. How did you build the teams in that direction as well?
I think just knowing, I mean, you listen to him talk, right? He's got an amazing voice. He's able to be a great show driver, and just kind of like knowing that. And I think like with Score, it's like, some of the producer guys, like they work so hard, and I don't know like necessarily everyone's dream goals, but you generally kind of feel like if you're working at the Score, like you kind of want to get on the other side of the microphone at some point.
Right.
And just the way that things are set up, it's like people hold those jobs for decades. So it's going to be a long time for you to maybe get there. And I think like it's like, okay, well, if we call Sean, like we've got an opportunity here. And I think like he's going to really do a lot with that opportunity. And, I would say like in like 15 years of hiring people, I don't think I've actually missed that many times. And I don't think we missed here at all either. So it's, you just kind of know at some points, right? So
you just observe, you see the work, you just say, okay, this is a kind of a worthwhile
Wasn't
situation.
his nickname at the score like the Phenom or something like that? That alone is like, I think he just turned in his resume and said the Phenom. I'm like, all right, let's go.
Leading you down the path there. Now, by sport, like for Bears, for football, you have to add more people. I would think in general, because it's such a Bears town or whatever. Yeah. And I noticed you guys are doing a lot more events and stuff too. Do you think about it from that perspective? Like, look, we need a lot more resources for Bears just because it's Bears.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Bears, I think, and NFL are just, you look at the numbers, no matter what shop you're at, it's NFL drives everything. So that's generally just going to get more resources, just kind of the nature of the beast. But I look at like all of our, like who else has, Sox Machine's got 3 guys covering it full time, but they're an alternative outlet. Like what major outlet besides CHGO has 3 guys covering the White Sox, 3 guys out at every Blackhawks practice, like that's, it's
a lot of coverage.
I think it's another secret to our sauce, right? Like people are like, you tune into maybe another outlet and they're talking about the Blackhawks if they get in the playoffs and no one's really that conversant. Well, we went out and we got Jay Zawoski, who was the guy that the score would turn to when it's time to talk about the Blackhawks.
Yeah.
And then paired him with 2 guys who are absolute diehards and were involved in, Mario was at Bleacher Nation and Greg he had been writing for all these different hockey outlets, and people know it's like these guys are hiring the real deal. These are guys who are living and breathing hockey just as much as I do.
So they're in it. They're actually in it. It's not just I get paid to do this, so I'll show up for my 1 hour and do the thing. They're in there, and I give you guys credit because, and I've told Sean this, and I've told Herb too. It's hard to do 5 days a week, White Sox stuff, doing an hour a day, and like I give the guys a lot of credit. It's like it's hard to come up with idea generation, etc. To continue on that path. Is there anything you do, Kevin, to motivate them, to help them get the juices flowing on the idea?
I mean, sometimes I show them the numbers, and
it's like, you got to do a little better here.
I just sometimes you try to like shape a headline or shape an idea or maybe shape, okay, the Sox are 3-27. Like, what are we going to do now? That sort of thing. But I mean, for the most part, the way things are set up, it's like we just empower the creators and we're here to fine tune. Like we've built the guardrails, and if something's sputtering, then you try to figure out what's going on. But no, I mean, I try not to claim success for like anything, and nor should I.
Kevin, let me ask you this though about that specifically. How much do you want the we'll call them characters, the characters in your various shows here to build up their personas, kind of like Barstool, right? This is what Barstool does. It's not only they have this podcast or blog or whatever, but then they're a character or there's someone, they've got to build up their persona, and so there's a reason why you want to come see them. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm super jealous of this. This is a great idea. The 120 Club, and I'm not a Cubs fan, but I see that shit and I'm like, that's pretty close to kind of like us, but we don't we don't do the videos and everything like they're doing. I love it. I'll be honest with you. I love this. I look forward to seeing that on Friday, even though I don't give a shit about the Cubs. And I'm like, this is pretty cool that they're pretty cool. They're out there, they're doing this, and it's like they're having a good time. So
sometimes I think like we're tweeting it out from the CHGO sports account. I'm just like, man, any White Sox fan who's following this is gonna be so mad at us.
No, I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cool. Like it's the collegial thing. I don't care about the result of the game, but like they're doing that. So how much do you encourage that or want the team to be doing those things?
So that was all a Jake Flanagan idea. I mean, absolute genius idea to do that. And then it's just really executed perfectly by Cody and Greg Braggs, and then Sarah and Emma, who are like kind of events and social people. And Yeah, I mean, it's different for every beat, right? Like you can't just come in and say like just like all city said, okay, Chicago has to run the same as Denver and Phoenix and Philly. I can't say that the Bears has to operate like the Hawks and the Hawks has to
Right.
operate like the Cubs. I think it's all different.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and their
so
audiences are gonna be receptive to various different things. I was just
yeah,
more curious about the ethos of it. Like, not everybody's gonna do
yeah,
what they're doing, but Wrigley Field has this reputation, and it's fun. And then they're out in the bleachers, and people are having a
right.
good time with it. You know, so
I think it would work at the Sox too. I mean,
yeah,
I think we're just trying to get this off and see if this works. Like, obviously, it's not a Friday 120 thing, but like,
yeah.
what is it Friday night or Saturday night? That would be like the equivalent at Sox Park.
I mean, it's tough. It's tough right now, Kevin, because no one's
I
there
know.
anyway. But I mean, we're there, but we're also old, so we couldn't do exactly what they're doing. We're getting drunk and everything, but we're getting drunk in a different way. We're just like we're sitting there and cursing at the team, you know. So I don't know. It would be tough. I'd have to think about that a little bit. Let me get to a quick drink here before we move on. This is my guy Baloney says hiring a bricklayer ended up being tremendously successful. Braggs is awesome. I would agree with that. He says any interest in a handsome landscaper with good ideas. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, he's in, Baloney. He's willing to hire you. He'll talk contract offline. All right. Finally, just to close this out, Kevin, you know you've kind of been through it all. Where do you see the future of local sports content going? You mentioned earlier on kind of liking to get away from the national stuff, and where do you see local kind of trending? Because to me, 10,000-foot view, the TV stations appear to be having a little bit of issues here, and they're regrouping. The radio stations seem to be a little more down than they had been. The ad revenues aren't there. Like, what's this going to look like?
I think you're looking at it. I mean, I think you just kind of have to go to where the fans are, you know, whether it's YouTube or podcasts or kind of whatever comes down the road, and just be accessible. You know, I talked about not liking to work at Yahoo because I didn't want to write about LeBron, Tom Brady, or whatever. The same is from the other side. Like, people don't want to just go to Yahoo or ESPN or wherever and just get that stuff. Like the appetite for local is still there. So I think as long as we can kind of build that up, build the audience, build those bonds, like, you know, get more people to kind of recognize us. Like you talked about people being characters, like that's like really, it's really important. I mean, there's people who don't even know that Barstool has podcasts because they just think it's on social media.
Right.
And I mean, there's people in my gym who only know who I am because they saw me on Instagram, right? And don't know that we have all this around us, right? Like, that's the guy who talks about the Bears on Instagram.
I see a little sliver of it, you know, like
yeah. So, so whether you're reaching those people on Instagram or a podcast or where, you know, at a tailgate at a thing, like that's kind of just what you have to do. And I think it more and more, you know, you guys do it right with the Section 108 events and building that community. And I think as long as you kind of index across the city and the suburbs and kind of reach people, I still think we're winning fan by fan. We're like 2.5 years into this, but like you still have to win person by person. Right. And as long as you kind of keep focus on that, I think it's, you know, and you kind of have the runway to do it, which we do. It's a great opportunity.
Absolutely. Is it too late right now for an amateur opening up WordPress, a Substack, starting their YouTube channel? Is it too late, Kevin? Or is there still plenty of room for everybody?
Absolutely not. Like, I mean, Cody Del Mendo opened up his podcast thing in 2020 as a pandemic thing, and now he's podcasting about the Cubs, you know, 4 years later. And part of the reason why was because he asked me to come on his podcast to promote Midway Minute in the middle of the pandemic. And I just liked him, and we would have good talks or whatever. And we were putting this thing together, and we just wanted someone who looked like he just rolled out of the bleachers. And I was like, I know exactly the guy. Let's call him. So,
that's him.
Right. So like that's just a good example. I mean, there's always opportunity. There's so many different ways to create content. There's so many different ways to reach people. Not a lot of ways to monetize it yet, but all city we're trying to figure out as many as possible. So as long as you can kind of do that, like it's as much, it can be as little or as big as you want it to be. And there's some people who treat it as a hobby, and I think that's great. I think it's awesome to have all those people in, and there's some people who use it as a springboard to a larger platform, or maybe they want to work for a team if they're into analytics. I just think of like when I first, I wanted to work for a newspaper. The only like recourse I had was to like copy every good article I ever wrote, staple it together, put it in a manila envelope, and like send it to like the Tulsa World. Like, what am I going to do in Tulsa? I don't know. Maybe they'll let me cover sports there. Like, so like now I think like how easier there's more competition, but the path to kind of the top is a lot shorter too in a lot of ways.
Yeah, not as much barrier to entry. Kevin, thanks so much for sharing your experiences working through Internet 1.0 content and your thoughts on talent acquisition, brand building, and the future of local sports content. Remember, we ain't trying to be right on the show. We're just trying to understand. Anything you want to plug before you go?
We've got a CHGO golf tournament next Monday at St. Andrews. Still spots available. It's awesome. That's another thing we do. We're doing 2 golf tournaments this year. They're only a month apart, so if you can't make it on Monday, we're doing one out at Cog Hill on Friday, August 23rd. So if you got Friday off, that might work better. You can check that out at allchgo.com. Get your foursome. It's a blast. The one at Cog Hill last year sold out. So if you want to get your tickets quickly as possible.
Beautiful. And become a diehard. I have the link in the show notes here, so make sure you click on that. Become a diehard. Kevin, thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it, and I loved learning a lot from you today. Appreciate you.
Awesome. I had a great time talking. I love talking about this stuff, so anytime. Just leave Jeff alone.
I will never. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye. Yeah. That was Kevin Kaduk. That was terrific. I've been waiting to have that conversation. That was an awesome conversation to have. Just very cool. Next week's guest, I've got a white whale coming on here. Back from the days when we used to do 3 things, I was trying to get this guy, and that's Joe Binder. He's the creator of Sox on 35th, and it's been 4 years trying to get him on the podcast. He's finally going to come on. We're going to talk about how he created Sox on 35th and what he's up to now in his professional career. Thanks to Punky's Pizza and Pasta and all the 108 family who's up in the YouTube comments. Appreciate you smashing the like button and, of course, the drinks and tips. I love all you. Will see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.